Hey y'all, today we're making pull-apart garlic bread with sourdough discard. Okay, so the first thing you need to do is get your mixing bowl and add in 1/4 cup of warm milk. It needs to be about 110 degrees. So then you're going to add to that 2 teaspoons of sugar and 1.5 teaspoons of instant yeast. Okay, it is sourdough, but we're using discard, which is sort of an inactive sourdough. It's kind of been sitting in the fridge, not doing a whole lot. So we're going to give it a little bit of a kickstart with the instant yeast. Okay, so I just mixed it up a little bit. This doesn't have to sit because it's the instant kind. So we're immediately going to add everything else. You need 2 cups of all-purpose flour. You're going to need 1 egg. We are going to add, look, a lot of eggs stringing off of there. Then we're going to add in 200 grams or about 3/4 cup of sourdough discard. I pulled mine out of the fridge. I weighed it out and I let it sit in the bowl and kind of come to room temp because you don't want to put it in there super cold for this particular recipe. So add your sourdough discard in there. And then we're going to add in about a tablespoon-ish. Y'all know I'm not going to measure any of these seasonings. About a tablespoon of parsley, and we're going to add about a teaspoon of salt, a teaspoon or tablespoon-ish of garlic powder, however much you want to put in there. And then we're going to get this mixing, okay? So it actually called, the recipe, I got it from, I think it's This Jess on Pinterest, but it called for fresh herbs, but I hardly ever have them, even though I'm fixing to start me a little herb garden, but that's another story. So I use dried. If you have fresh, use fresh. If not, dried's going to work just fine. Okay, so I went ahead and started mixing, and I just kind of broke that egg up a little bit. And then as you're mixing, you're gonna, see it's real dry. You're gonna add in 2 tablespoons of melted butter. And I will say this, the recipe calls for unsalted butter, but after having made this, I will probably use salted butter next time because it also calls for like flaky salt on top of the bread when you finish it, and I didn't have that. So I felt like mine could have used a tad more salt. So I would say if you're not going to put the flaky salt on the top at the end, use salted butter. That's just my opinion. You can do it however you want to. You're going to let that mix just a couple of minutes until it gets to this consistency. You see it is all pulled together and it is not sticking to my hand. See that? So then you're going to put that out on your little silicone mat like I'm using, or you can use a lovely counter if you have one. I just have these dang tile countertops, and got to use something. I got to put something down over it. So I'm not going to knead this very much. You need to knead it until it forms this really, solid dough ball. But mine pretty much got there in the mixer. So I'm just going to knead it for a second or two, and then that's going to be a wrap on my kneading. That's all we're going to do for that. So then I'm just going to kind of form it into a little ball, and it's a pretty, like it holds together real well. It's not like a real loose ball. So then I sprayed a little glass bowl with some cooking spray, and I'm going to drop my dough ball in there, and I'm going to flip it over just to kind of coat the, all the sides of it with the cooking spray. You can definitely just use oil if you want to, but cooking spray works for me and it's just easier. So I just made sure it was all coated just in case it rises up enough to touch the plastic, it won't stick. So you're going to cover that up with some plastic and you're going to let that rise. It says an hour to an hour and a half. It took mine almost 2 hours because my kitchen is very cold, but it needs to double in size, okay? So while that was doubling, I'm putting my butter together. Now what I have there is the other 6 tablespoons, because we ended up using a whole stick, so 2 in the dough and then 6 for this. So 6 tablespoons of softened butter, about a tablespoon of parsley, a tablespoon of garlic powder, half a teaspoon of salt, okay? Then you're just gonna mix that up until everything is fully incorporated. We're just making a garlic butter, y'all. That's what we're doing. So just mix it up good until everything is all mixed in there. So once your dough is ready and you see it's doubled in size, it's quite a bit bigger than it was, we are going to flop this out onto our silicone mat. And then I'm just going to kind of press it down just a little bit because it's good and puffy. You don't have to knock all the air out of it. You're going to do all that in a minute anyway. So you're going to need to cut this into 12 equal pieces. Okay, so I cut it in half. I cut each half in half, and then I cut each quarter into thirds. Does that make sense? You see what I'm doing? This is the easiest way for me to kind of get my stuff even. Now, if you have an easier way to get the little dough balls even, then you cut it however you want to. But for me, this works good. And were they all exactly even? Of course not. I was cutting them. But, close enough. It gets them pretty close. So, like I said, you just need 12 equal little pieces, okay? Because these are going to be the little parts of our pull-apart bread. Go ahead and grease you a 9x5 loaf pan. Okay, then you're going to take each one of those little pieces that you cut, and whatever way you want to, I do it about 3 different ways, forming it into a ball, during this video, but however you do it, it'll be just fine. It doesn't have to be perfect. Then I just press it out a little bit, and then I'm going to take my little mini roller, and I got that from Pampered Chef, I think, but I do have one similar linked in my Amazon store. If y'all are looking for one, that link's down in the description box, just in case you need one, because they are pretty nifty for stuff like this. So what you're going to do is roll those out to about 4 inches. Now, the center of my silicone mat right there is 5 inches. So, was I actually measuring? No, not really. But that's about the size it ended up anyway. So you don't want them super, super thin. But as they sit, too, they'll kind of pull themselves kind of back together. Even if you roll them out big, they're going to kind of shrink back up. You know what I mean? So roll them all out. And then once you get them all rolled out, you're going to take that butter that you made and you're going to put a good little slathering. That's a slathering, y'all. Look it up in the dictionary. Is it really a word? I don't know. But we're going to slather some butter on there, and then we're going to fold it in half like a little taco, and we're going to tuck it right down in that pan. Okay, see, that's what we're going to do. We are just going to keep doing that until we've gotten all of our little pieces of dough put into our pan, okay? And, you kind of have to judge how much butter you're going to use. You don't want to run out, and if you feel like you're not very good at measuring stuff, go ahead and reserve a little bit of it, because we're going to need to save some to put on the top once they come out of the oven, okay? So you're going to try to just kind of equally distribute it throughout your little dough pieces. And I'm definitely not measuring. I'm just kind of eyeballing. And you're just going to keep going, like I said, until you get everything put into your little pan. And y'all, I have been looking forward to making this for quite a while. I know I haven't given y'all a sourdough recipe, in a week or two, but this was so good. I made some chicken spaghetti and I needed some bread, so I made this. So once you get it all in your pan, y'all, you see how low it is in the pan? We don't want this to rise up above the pan like we do bread. It just needs to get pretty puffy. So we're going to cover this up again, and we're going to let this sit this time for about 45 minutes. Again, I had to let mine sit a little bit longer because my kitchen, I keep my house 64, 65 degrees, if that helps y'all judge it. But it doesn't need to rise, like I said, above the pan. It's going to do that when it cooks. But you see where it's at now? So it's still just a little bit below the edges of the pan, but it's nice and puffy. We're going to put that in the oven at 350 degrees Fahrenheit, and we're going to let that bake for about 30 minutes or until it's nice and golden brown on top. See there? Now, it's beautiful from that angle, but when I turn it around, you see where a couple of the taller pieces kind of busted. Bread does that a lot of times in the oven, so if yours does that, don't worry about it. It'll be just fine. It's just not as pretty, as one that doesn't bust. But it happens sometimes with bread, especially with sourdough in my experience. So anyway, once you take that out, you're going to take the rest of that butter you saved and you're going to spread that all over the top of your bread. Then I let it sit for just a couple of minutes until it was, cool enough for me to handle. And then I wanted to pull it apart so y'all could take a look at it. But y'all, I'm telling you, if you like garlic bread, like with your spaghetti or lasagna or whatever you eat garlic bread with, if you do sourdough, make sure that you try this. This stuff is really, really good. And it's really good when you heat it back up, like for leftovers also. But I'm telling you, the flavor is fantastic. But like I said, I didn't add extra salt to the top. So I think next time I make it, I'm going to use salted butter just to give it a little bit more of a salty flavor. But you do whatever you want. All right, that's all I've got for y'all today. And I'll catch y'all on the next one. Bye, y'all.